Oh, it's you again? Welcome back. Oh, hi, I'm Marc. I used to be a senior artist at Blizzard Entertainment and now I teach art for a living. And in this new anatomically correct episode of my weekly series that I call YouTube Art School, I'll show you how I simplify the human body to draw characters. I consider this as the first step to drawing characters from imagination. So keep watching if that's been your goal, because you're about to level up big time. Guaranteed. Oh, quickly, let's get this class started. Alright, class is in session. Pay attention. I'm about to share the body construction that I've developed after decades of practicing drawing, so make sure you pay the class fee of either 1 like or 1 sub to benefit from all that experience. You must. I swear it'll be a good investment though. Do it. Okay, let's get right into it. First, this is what we're aiming to do. Depending on how much experience you have, this might seem hard, but I'll break down what goes into it so that you too can do it ASAP. When drawing this, there's a step that I barely show, the quick construction of the body. Essentially, it's that step that allows me to draw characters like these in almost any pose or angle from imagination. What makes it all possible is the construction of the simple mannequin. I covered this stuff in a lot more detail in my art program, for which, by the way, you can find a coupon down in the video description for a big discount until the end of the month only. But for a short 10-minute YouTube tutorial, I think you'll get a lot from this. The problem I had when I first started to learn this stuff was that I was just getting overwhelmed by the amount of information looking at my references. Because that's obviously where we're going to start, drawing from reference. Still, looking at this, where are you supposed to start? The secret to learning to draw anything is to first simplify. There's too much information here, most of which we don't need at this point when we're starting a drawing. But what's important though? Let me show you what I look for here, which should hopefully help you observe your references better and improve faster. There's not just one way to do it though. Many artists use different mannequins, but I think mine works really well and it's as simple as it gets, kind of. Anyways, the first thing that we want to observe is proportions. A quick way to remember proportions is to find points of reference. So here are the main ones that I think about when drawing. Starting from the head, I'm just going to simplify it as an egg shape, but you could also use a box if that's easier to visualize. Most of my characters are going to be around 7 to 8 heads tall. This gives me the full height, which I can then cut in half to find the crotch. Where is it? Oh, it's right there. If we look at the reference, her proportions aren't quite the same, but some people have longer legs, so my version is still accurate, okay? Now, let's add a few more body parts. The neck first. Half a head long-ish. The next piece then is the torso. It's basically just going to be a big egg shape occupying about half the space left above the crotch. Then I take a slice off at the bottom to make it look closer to real rib cage, which is obviously what it represents. Just like this. And then the next most important part is going to be the hips, a problem area for many people. Just like the head, it can also be simplified as a box where the front face is slightly narrower than the back face. For males, I'll just keep it square like a regular box, but for females, it's slightly different. It's a little more accurate to the anatomy if I shave off the bottom corners to get this shape here. Slightly more triangular, but still boxy. And the hard parts are done. The rest is just going to be a bunch of cylinders and spheres for the limbs. The shoulders, 2 spheres attaching onto the torso shape. For the arm length, just keep in mind that your character should be able to cover their private parts comfortably while standing straight. So a little past the crotch, the upper arms as cylinders, then a sphere for the elbow, and another cylinder of equal length for the forearm. Easy. The upper legs are also going to be cylinders, and the same pattern repeats. Spheres for the knees, and another cylinder of equal length for the lower leg. I'll skip over the hands and the feet, but you can check out the video description for a class where I focus on hands and feet only. I recommend it. Now, Her torso is still flying, so let's add another cylinder for the abdomen. And if this is new to you, you can stop here. This should already be very helpful without being too overwhelming. Go ahead and try practice this stuff from memory. The more of the mannequin you can remember, the better you'll be able to observe your references and get more out of them. Also, you're gonna have to remember that mannequin if you want to ever draw from imagination. Now, I like it with a few more details though, so we're only missing a few to wrap this mannequin up. And we also need to do the male version real quick. First though, let's connect the shoulders to the torso with the clavicles in the front and the scapula in the back. You'll know your scapula is probably in the right spot if the two of them can create an arrow shape with their negative space in between. In the front, then the clavicles join at the sternum. It's not super obvious from this angle, but the shape they create seen from above is like a bike handle. Oh, and let's not forget to give her a chest. I also recommend that you practice drawing the symmetry line whenever you have the opportunity. The whole point of doing this exercise is to get used to seeing the body as a structure made out of 3D volumes, and drawing symmetry lines or cross sections too, actually, really good. Both of these things train your eyes to see 3D better. And if it's too hard to draw freehand like this, use a reference to make sure that it's accurate. Anyways, on to the male now. Or rather, the few differences between the male and female. It's going to be very similar, but there are 3 distinctions that we can make. The shoulders will be a tad wider first. Then, the hips are more of a box, like I mentioned already. Oh, and by the way, the female hips are also tilted backwards by default. If we look at the side view here real quick, we can see the female hips and the male hips here, slightly different as you can probably tell. Overall, just straighter. Important distinction. Now, as a result of changing the hips shape, the legs will also attach differently. The male hips are taller and not as wide, so the legs will come together a little more. Oh, also, let's do a quick operation on him. And there we go. So I guess that was 4 differences? 5 differences? Not 3. Anyways, the same thing. With all these complex body parts now simplified to just a bunch of geometric shapes, geometric volumes, I think looking at references is a lot less intimidating. The more important parts are these 3. The head, the torso, and the pelvis. You gotta be able to spot these shapes in the right perspective. Everything else, the limbs and the abdomen, are just simple cylinders, a lot easier. To make up the simple mannequin that we'll need as a first step whenever we're drawing characters, these are the shapes that you'll need to be able to draw this dismembered character. These are your ingredients. It's good to practice drawing these individual parts in different angles too. If one of these is more problematic than the others, and focus on it some more. You can carry a cheap sketchbook and practice drawing these volumes individually whenever you have a few minutes in a day. If you can draw these individually, then there's really no reason you shouldn't be able to draw the full character too. Now, obviously, a lot of experienced artists probably share similarities in their mannequin. Maybe that's you. Or maybe you might end up with something similar too if you were to spend a bunch of years trying to simplify the human form. The cool thing is that you don't have to. You can instead benefit from the time that I spent and adopt this mannequin recipe to get started. Hacks! Eventually, after a lot of practice, you'll be able to ditch the references completely to create your own characters from scratch. But you'll always want to start with a simple mannequin. Initially, there should be little to no thought given to the muscles, the fat, or anything remotely close to a detail. That comes later. So I've only really talked about the whole body so far, but this process of simplification can really help with any part of the body that you're struggling with. Every limb, every joint can be simplified to help you understand it better. I highly recommend it. At least for me, seeing every body part as a simple volume is what made anatomy click. Simplification when learning anatomy is key. Let's try a few more in perspective, from imagination this time, to see how well the mannequin holds up, even though I already know it holds up great. The first thing that we start with, always, is the head. Head, and then torso, and then pelvis. Just like I did at the beginning of the class here. When they're in perspective, they'll usually start to overlap, and this is probably the trickiest part of drawing the mannequin in perspective. Obviously, don't bother with this if you're just starting. This is advanced stuff, but it's good practice if you have more experience and can't quite draw anatomically correct characters from imagination yet. Practice drawing overlapping volumes. Stack them up. Now, we just gotta add the legs, the arms, good enough. And boom, we have a quick little sketch that already looks like a character. Now we only need to draw the silhouette over, and we quickly end up with a believable character. From imagination at that, all thanks to my helpful mannequin, allowing me to focus on proportions and perspective first, then the anatomy and the details. And this is going to wrap up today's class. That's all the art XP points that you're getting from me this week. Let me know if it was useful and if you have any suggestions for future videos. I always read all the comments. Oh, and if you want to try the same brush that I've used for the class today, because it's amazing, you can grab it as part of my free brush set down in the description below. These are brushes that I use all the time, daily. I love them all. Hope it helps you stay motivated and creative, and don't forget to check out my complete art education program.